A sausage link snapped the silence and somewhere a secret unraveled. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Let's grow this mystery-loving crew. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Your messages always bring a smile. Can't wait to read yours. When the doorbell rings 15 minutes before lunch, it's a bad sign. When it rings twice, it's practically an emergency. And when it rings 3 times in a row, rapid, deliberate chimes, it's either the start of a murder case or someone trying to sell Wolfe a new brand of mustard. Either way, it means I have to get up. I put down the knife I was using to dice celery Fritz's orders, not mine, and crossed the hall to answer the front door of the brownstone. I opened it to find a woman standing there in a cream-colored trench coat that looked like it had seen as many kitchens as Wolfe had refused to enter. She had eyes that darted left and right, like she was afraid the begonias in the front yard were wired for sound. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe," she said, privately. "It's important." They always say that nobody ever wants to discuss something unimportant in Nero Wolfe's office. That's not what gets you past our door. What gets you in is money, menace, or mystery, preferably all 3. And this dame had at least one of them, maybe 2, depending on the caliber of importance. She was toting. Name? I asked. She hesitated, like she was debating whether the truth would help her case or hurt it. Rosa Veroni. Didn't ring a bell. I've met my share of restaurant owners, suppliers, and sous chefs, and she didn't fit the type, or at least not the high-end kind Wolfe respects enough to grumble about. Still, there was something behind her expression, something cooked down and simmering just below the surface. "Well, Miss Veroni, Mr. Wolfe doesn't take walk-ins. But if you've got a legitimate concern and a willingness to wait through an awkward session, he might hear you out. You have a seat in the front room. I'll ask." She nodded, stepped inside, and perched on the edge of the red armchair, like it might accuse her of trespassing. I headed upstairs to the plant rooms where Wolfe was conferring with his orchids. He was mid-prayer with a Miltonia hybrid and didn't acknowledge my presence, which meant he had at least 5 more minutes of mystical communion before reality could intrude. I waited until his hand relaxed from its hover above the pot, then cleared my throat. "There's a woman downstairs, Rosa Veroni. She's got that urgent dash, but dash afraid dash to dash say dash why look. Says it's private." He turned his head fractionally, which in Wolfe speak is a standing ovation. "Does she appear sane? She's not raving, and she's not brandishing a weapon. But she's got a tension level that makes the orchids look like underachievers." That got a full glance from him. "What is her trade?" "No idea yet, but if I had to guess, I'd say she knows her way around a sausage casing." Wolfe grunted, which meant he was intrigued, probably by the mention of sausage. "Very well. 10 minutes. Then lunch. Bring her in." I went back, down, gave her the nod, and led her into the office. Wolfe was behind his desk in his mountainous glory, dressed like the inside of a well-aged wine bottle, deep burgundy robe, pale shirt, and a look that dared you to waste his time. "Miss Veroni," I said, gesturing toward the red chair opposite his. "Mr. Wolfe You've got 10 minutes before the roast chicken declares war. She sat down, smoothed her coat, and met Wolfe's eyes like someone who hadn't decided yet whether this was confession or negotiation. Mr. Wolfe, I'm here because something's wrong at Veroni and Sons. Wolfe arched a brow. A butcher. Shop, a sausage business. My father founded it. It's been in our family for 73 years. We supply to dozens of high-end restaurants in the city, but someone's been tampering with our product. And last night, my brother Tony disappeared. Wolfe sighed. Madam, I am not the police. If you believe your brother has been abducted, or if you suspect criminal sabotage, I suggest contacting the appropriate. I did. They said Tony probably took off on his own. But he wouldn't. He was terrified. Someone threatened him last week. He didn't tell me who. Just that if he didn't keep quiet about something he'd seen at the plant, things would go bad. Real bad. And then he was gone. That caught Wolfe's attention in the way few things do before lunch. What precisely was he planning to reveal? I don't know. But I do know someone's using our factory to move something that doesn't belong in a sausage. I waited a beat, but she didn't blink. Neither did Wolfe. What, then? He asked. I don't know. Drugs, money, documents, whatever it is. Tony found out. He said he had proof, and then he vanished. Wolfe leaned back, his fingers pressing together. I dislike commerce being used as a front for criminal enterprise, he said. And I despise the bastardization of a noble foodstuff, Archie. Yeah. Take Miss Veroni's number. Ask her to remain available. I require more information before I commit to anything. In the meantime, I will have lunch. Miss Veroni. Stood. So, you'll consider it. I never consider. I either act or do not act. I will act if what you suspect proves worthy of my time, which, translated, meant he was already halfway invested. But he wouldn't show his cards until I brought him something juicier than a missing brother. And a vague threat. After she left, I jotted down notes and checked the clock. Wolfe was halfway to the dining room when I caught up with him, planning to take the case. I asked. He didn't pause. If sausages are being used for subterfuge, Mr. Goodwin, then I must insist on an inquiry. Nothing less will do. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you get Nero Wolfe out of his chair intellectually, anyway. All it takes is a missing man, a dangerous secret, and a sausage link whispering betrayal. Wolfe didn't bring the sausage back up during lunch, which was his way of saying he was thinking about it. That's how it works with him. If he talks about orchids, food, or the New York Times crossword, you know he's disengaged. But when he goes quiet and merely gestures for more gravy, his brain's grinding along like one of those old sausage machines Rosa Veroni probably grew up round. After lunch, I waited the required half-hour for digestion and decorum before I brought coffee into the office and asked the obvious. So, are we taking this one? Wolfe, already settled in his chair, with his belly pointed vaguely in the direction of a globe he never touched, didn't look up. I have not yet resolved the central ambiguity, which is, he sipped, whether Miss Veroni's concern is born of loyalty or guilt. She may believe her brother is missing for noble reasons, or she may fear she's somehow responsible. I sat across from him. Could be both. It could. But sentiment alone is not cause for action. He took another sip, then gave me the closest thing I'd get to an instruction. Go, learn, verify that Veroni and Sons exists, and that it's worth the trouble. Speak with someone who's tasted their sausage and lived. I headed out by mid-afternoon, hit the curb, and flagged a cab. A quick call to Lon Cohen at the Gazette got me a brief sketch of the Veroni business. An old-school meat-packing operation out of Queens, third-generation, family-run, with a specialty in artisanal Italian sausages. Supposedly they were good, enough to get onto plates at La Bombetta and Cotonio's, which put them on Wolfe's radar even if he hadn't noticed. Lon also mentioned a rumor that the business had been under scrutiny lately, though for what he couldn't say. He promised to poke around and call back if anything interesting turned up. Veroni and Sons occupied a low brick building that looked like it had survived both Prohibition and the invention of nitrates. The sign out front had a charming old world flair, gold lettering, a silhouette of a pig, and a slogan in Italian I didn't bother translating. Inside, the air hit like a cold curtain meat, salt, spices, and just a hint of bleach. A guy in a white coat and mesh hairnet gave me the once-over as I approached the front counter. "Help you? I'm looking for someone in charge," I said. Not the kind of in charge who answers phones. The kind who loses sleep when a shipment's late. The man studied me. "You a cop?" "Nope." "You with the health department?" "Nope again." "You gonna buy something?" I smiled. "Only information. And only if it's fresh. Name's Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe." That got me a blink and a nod toward a half-glassed office behind the counter. "Talk to Carla." I knocked once and stepped inside. Carla Veroni looked to be in her early 30s, sharp cheekbones, black hair twisted into a bun, and the kind of eyes that either catalogued inventory or stored grudges. She wore a fitted jacket over her apron and gave the impression she could butcher a bore or a board meeting without changing tone. "You're with Wolfe?" she asked. "Yep." "Your sister came to see him." She leaned back, crossed her arms. "So he's looking into Tony?" "Maybe. Depends on what I bring back." "What can you tell me about your brother?" Carla exhaled through her nose. "Tony's a pain. In the ass. Always has been. Heart of gold, but no filter. He ran production, oversaw the sausage floor. Lately he was acting strange, jumpy. Kept saying something wasn't right in the shipments." "Did he say what?" "No, just that there was something going on. Said he was going to prove it. I told him to be careful. Next thing, he doesn't show up for work." That was 3 days ago. You call the cops, of course. They said he probably needed a break. He does that sometimes, takes off. But this time felt different. Different how? His locker was cleared out. Not just his coat. His keys. His notes. Even the little gold pig charm he always kept on his key ring. I raised an eyebrow. "You think he ran?" "I think someone made it look like he ran. Or scared him into doing it." We talked a little longer about suppliers, staff, no known enemies. She mentioned one new client, a boutique grocer in the Bronx that placed a huge order a few weeks ago, cash only. That set off a small bell in my head, but not loud enough to ring a conclusion. I was walking out when I noticed the storage logs pinned up by the door. A delivery sheet from 2 weeks ago had been partially torn and then taped back. It listed crates going out, destinations, and one entry marked with a question mark in the receiver field, no name, no address. I made a mental note to borrow a copy later if Wolfe said go. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Fritz had started prepping for dinner, and Wolfe was in his chair, digesting another book. He raised a finger as I came in. Well, companies. Real. Rose's story checks out. Brothers missing. Possibly under suspicious conditions. Staff's loyal, but uneasy. Oh, and there's a shipment that went out to no one, apparently HMM. Also, there's a new buyer paying in cash unusual volume, and a bit cloak and dagger. Wolfe closed the book with a gentle thud. We will take the case. Because of the missing brother or the mysterious sausage. Because, he said, I dislike contamination, whether of food or of enterprise. He motioned for the phone. Call Saul. I want surveillance on the Veroni facility, and ask Mr. Panzer to locate Anthony Veroni. Discreetly. He must start tonight. As I dialed, Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, lips tight, somewhere behind that vast brow. The wheels were beginning to turn, and I'll say this, when Wolfe starts sniffing around sausage, someone's about to get ground up. The next morning brought rain relentless, grey, and wine splattered, which meant umbrellas on the sidewalk, and complaints from Wolfe about the humidity disrupting his orchid schedule. He didn't like interruptions in routine, and whether ranked somewhere between anarchists and bad vinegar on his list of natural evils. I, on the other hand, had a date with a smokehouse. Saul Panzer had checked in around 8 a.m. with a typically economical report. No sign of Tony Veroni at any of his known haunts, no apartment activity. No calls made from his usual burner, and none of the side gigs Saul had flagged turned anything. But Saul, being Saul, had also tailed a delivery from the Veroni facility the night before. It didn't go to a grocery store. It went to a locked garage in a part of the Bronx where silence was cheaper than rent. The driver didn't stay long. Neither did the van. But the garage had 2 cameras, one of them likely pointed inward, which gave us a place to start if Wolfe wanted to push. He did. Find the driver. Wolfe instructed over breakfast, the man who took the van to the Bronx. Learn his name, his habits, and whether he has reason to visit a locked storage facility in the rain. Sure. Want me to bring a sandwich while I'm at it? Only if it contains evidence. Otherwise, no. I put on my coat, grabbed my umbrella, and left the brownstone, back in Queens. The Veroni plant was already humming when I arrived. Steam wafted through the side vents, and trucks rolled in and out like clockwork. I walked around the back and found an entry where the crewmen took their smoke breaks. One of them a lanky kid with a scar under his eye and a giant's beanie pulled. Lowe looked up as I approached. Seen you yesterday, he said. You buying again? Sort of, I said. Looking for one of your delivery guys. Drove the overnight run to the Bronx. White van, warehouse delivery. You know who that might have been? The kid shrugged. Could be Lou. Could be Sal. Depends on the day. Which one drives late night? That'd be Lou. Sal's got a kid. Doesn't like the dark. I handed over a 5 and got a nod toward the street. Lou parks in the side lot. Smokes these little cloves that stink up the whole place. You'll know when you find him. I circled the building, and sure enough, found a man leaning against a dented Ford with the exact scent of spiced death circling him like a cloud. Lou was in his 50s, wore a tan jacket, and had a mustache so thin it probably filed taxes as a dependent. You, Lou? He gave me the side eye. You ain't management. You from the city? Nope. Just curious about a delivery you made last night. Curiosity's a quick way to get yelled at. Not if you're careful. I showed him a folded 20. Not a bribe, just a token of appreciation for potential enlightenment. He looked at it like it was either going to bite him or vanish. You from Tony? No. But I'm looking for him. Lou's face twitched. He missing? You didn't hear. Figured he took off again. He does that, not like this. Lou hesitated, then pocketed the 20. Yeah. I did a Bronx run. No label. On the drop sheet. Cash job. Owner said the client preferred privacy. Ain't my place to ask. You recognize the guy? Didn't see him. I just pulled in, rolled the crate off the ramp, and left. Doors were locked behind me before I made it to the street. Crate, wooden, sealed, heavy, didn't feel like sausage. What did it feel like? Lou blew smoke out his nose. Felt like whatever Tony was worried about. Now we were cooking. I called Wolfe from a payphone across the street, a habit he insisted on for sensitive updates. As if rotary dials were still the gold standard for discretion. Report, he said. Lou confirms the shipment was anonymous, sealed, and suspicious. Doesn't know what was in it. But it wasn't sausage. Good. He hung up. That was. Wolfe for excellent work. Carry on. Don't get shot. I headed back into the city and spent the afternoon checking on the boutique grocer. Rosa had mentioned Verducci Market on 146th and Park. It was upscale, clean, and smelled like cheese and lavender. The manager, a smug type with oiled hair and the vocabulary of a bored Magda D, confirmed they had purchased from Veroni and Sons once. Special order, he said. Barely looking up from the inventory screen, somebody requested their fennel and pork links. Cash order. Never followed up. Somebody, a man, middle-aged, didn't leave a name. Said he was hosting a private tasting. Had a list of brands, and Veroni was one. Was that normal? No. I took the receipt with me. Wolfe would want it, even if it didn't say much beyond weight and cost. The numbers mattered to him. Patterns, habits, monetary flow all part of the equation. I've seen him unravel a blackmail ring from a florist's ledger and to bus transfers. By the time I made it back, it was nearing 6. Fritz had started on a veal roast, and the smell hit me like a reminder that I hadn't eaten anything but suspicion since noon. Wolfe was in the office, of course, sipping beer and scanning one of his notebooks. I handed him the grocer's receipt and my scribbled account of Lou's delivery. He read in silence. "This confirms," he said at last, "that Veroni and Sons has been compromised. The plant is functioning not merely as a purveyor of sausages, but as a pipeline, likely for contraband. Any idea what kind?" "No, but Anthony Veroni discovered it. He either attempted to confront someone or gather proof. Now he is gone." I nodded. "So who's next?" "Miss Veroni. Bring her here." "You think she's in danger?" "I think she's next in line, and I intend to know whether she's being watched, followed, or manipulated." I picked up the phone and dialed her number. After 3 rings, she answered. "Miss Veroni," I said, "Mr. Wolfe requests your presence." Now, she didn't argue. Smart woman, because when Wolfe stops asking questions and starts issuing summonses, the game has changed. The trap is being set, and the bait, that's still in the casing. Rosa Veroni arrived 23 minutes later, damp from the rain and flushed from either hurry or worry. I met her at the door and helped her out of her coat, which was speckled with drops the size of gilt. She smelled faintly of clove and something more pungent, maybe a spice from the factory, or maybe stress, made manifest. Either way, she followed me silently to the office. Wolfe was seated, of course, hands clasped on his girth, eyes half-lidded in what would appear to a stranger as boredom. It wasn't. It was calculation at rest. "Miss Veroni," he said without standing, "you are aware, I presume, that your family's factory is being used for illicit purposes?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. I saw her fingers twitch ringless, polished nails biting lightly into her palm. "I suspected," she said finally. "Tony told me there were deliveries that didn't go through the books. He thought something was being smuggled. He just didn't know what." Wolfe nodded. "Your brother was right to worry. I have confirmed that a delivery left your facility for an unmarked warehouse. In the Bronx, it was not sausage." She looked stricken. "So it's true?" "Yes, and I believe he attempted to gather evidence. For what purpose? I cannot yet say whether to expose, blackmail, or simply protect you." She shook her head quickly. "Not blackmail. Tony hated secrets. He was blunt, naive sometimes, but never dishonest. That would be convenient," Wolfe murmured. "But inconvenient people rarely disappear without reason, especially those who interfere with clandestine operations involving cash deliveries, anonymous clients, and mislabeled cargo." Her mouth tightened. "You think someone hurt him?" "I think he discovered something valuable, and someone didn't want him to share it," I chimed in. "Do you know anyone in the business who's new?" "Unvetted, someone Tony might have mentioned or avoided." She looked at me, thinking. "There's one, a man named Domenico Lastra. He started making deliveries for us 2 months ago. Came recommended by a supplier, said he had trucking experience. No questions asked. Tony didn't like him. Called him slick. Said he had eyes like a crow." Wolfe's brows lifted slightly. "And you allowed this?" She glanced down, embarrassed. "We were short-staffed. Tony argued against hiring him, but the board voted. I'm not the majority owner, Mr. Wolfe. My uncle Pietro holds that. Wolfe's fingers interlaced. Nepotism, the reliable poison of enterprise. I jotted the name down. You know where to find Lustra? She nodded. He rents a room over a tavern in Woodhaven. The owner's a cousin of his. I stood. I'll check it out. Wolfe raised a hand. No, not yet. Mr. Panzer will handle that. I want you to visit the factory tomorrow. Miss Veroni, act natural. Speak to no one of our inquiry. Tell your uncle you've engaged an accountant to review expenses. That will give us a pretext to access the books. She nodded, her jaw set. What if they're watching me? They are, but not closely. Not yet. They assume you're in the dark. You must remain so in their eyes. I offered to walk her out. At the door, she turned to me. You think we'll find him, Archie? I think we're getting closer to someone who knows where he is. She gave me a look I'd seen before, the one that came when someone wanted hope but didn't dare ask for it. Then she left, melting into the wet evening like a wisp of garlic steam over boiling water. Back in the office, Wolfe summoned Saul. When he arrived, quiet as snowfall. As usual, Wolfe handed over Lustra's name and address. Discreet observation. Wolfe instructed, I want to know who he sees, who he calls, and whether he sleeps well. Saul nodded once and was gone. The next morning dawned clearer, with a breeze strong enough to shake a few petals off the orchids. Wolfe didn't comment, likely counting the ones that fell, but he was sharper than usual over breakfast, which meant his mental trap was beginning to close by mid-morning. Saul called in from a phone booth near Lustra's residence. Interesting pattern, he said. Lustra went to a pawn shop last night, bought a burner phone, made a call from it in the alley out back, spoke in Sicilian, fast and quiet. Translate, I asked. He said, the brother took something. I don't know where he put it. The girl doesn't have it. Response? None. He listened, nodded, then smashed the phone against the wall. Walked back upstairs. I relayed that to Wolfe. So he's nervous, I said. Means he's hiding something. Or afraid of someone. Both, Wolfe said. If Lustra believes Miss Veroni does not possess what Anthony took, then whatever Tony found is still at large, or stashed, precisely, and someone else is looking for it. Aggressively, he paused. We must bait a trap. I leaned in. You want to flush someone? Yes, but carefully. If Anthony Veroni is still alive, any move must not provoke rash action. Wolfe made 3 calls before noon. One to Lon Cohen, asking him to run a background check on Lustra and Pietro Veroni. One to Inspector Kramer's office, though he didn't leave a message, just noted the time. And one to Pearlie's Stebbins, asking in coded language whether any unreported disappearances had occurred involving trucks, warehouses, or crates. Then he wrote a note when he handed it to me. It was addressed to Pietro Veroni, co-owner Veroni, and Sons, and it was pure Wolfe. 3 sentences, dense with implication, and crafted to produce maximum disturbance with minimal revelation. Deliver this in person. He said, do not linger, observe his expression. I took it, tucked it in my jacket, and headed for Queens. Pietro Veroni was in his 60s, square-bodied with a thick neck and a voice like a concrete mixer. He opened the letter, read it, and turned a shade darker. He looked at me once brief, and sharp, then folded the paper without a word and stuffed it in his desk. He said nothing, but he picked up his phone. That was all I needed when I got back to the brownstone. Wolfe was already waiting. "Well?" he asked. He read it, didn't blink, but he made a call as soon as I left. Wolfe permitted himself a slight smile. "Excellent," he said. "Now we wait. Someone will make a mistake." And when they did, Wolfe would be ready with the sausage, the spice, and the sting. That night, the brownstone was unusually still. Fritz had outdone himself with a duck-eel range, but Wolfe barely touched it, a sign of mounting tension, not illness. He brooded in silence for 27 minutes after dinner, until he suddenly declared he would not read, but would sit with his beer and think, which meant I wasn't allowed to talk. I took the hint, retreated to my room with the evening paper, and kept one ear tuned for the phone. It rang at 9:40 p.m. sharp. I was halfway down the stairs before Fritz even moved toward it. Wolfe beat him to the receiver. "Yes," he said. Crisp. It was Saul. Wolfe listened, murmured an acknowledgement, and then hung up. I waited at the office doorway. "Lustre has made his move," Wolfe said. He met with Pietro Veroni in a parked car behind the sausage plant. 15 minutes. Saul recorded the audio from across the alley. Let me guess, neither of them suggested a cooking class. Wolfe gave me a look. "You may retrieve the recording. Saul will wait." 10 minutes later, I was riding in a cab toward the rendezvous point, a quiet corner in Queens with nothing but shuttered storefronts and the kind of wind that rattles things not meant to move. Saul stood in the shadows, unlit cigarette in hand, eyes scanning like radar. He handed me the small recorder without preamble. Half the conversation was in Sicilian, he said, but I caught the gist. They're panicking. I brought it back to Wolfe, who'd already cleared his desk. I set the device down, pressed play, and let the whispers run. Pietro's voice came first, gruff, pressed. "We need to find it. Fast." Lustre replied, lower, clipped. "I've searched everything. Lockers empty, apartments clean. She doesn't have it." "What about the freezer?" Checked it twice. Then Pietro, with a hiss, he talked to someone. "I know it. Someone outside." A beat of silence. "If it gets out," Pietro growled, "we're finished." That was enough for Wolfe. He stopped the tape. "It is as I suspected," he said. Anthony Veroni discovered the scheme and acquired physical proof, something tangible enough to be hidden. Perhaps a photograph, a ledger, even a sample of the contraband. "And the sausage," I said. "It's more than cover. It's conduit." "Yes," Wolfe said, "but not merely to mask movement. To infiltrate." I blinked. "You mean they're hiding the goods inside the product?" "Precisely. A sausage casing offers concealment, durability, and plausible weight. A perfect vessel. For what? Drugs." Wolfe paused. "Possibly. Or microfilm. Electronics. Something small, but valuable." "I require the books. The factory logs?" "Yes, if we can trace discrepancies in inventory, or even shifts in spice orders." We may infer which shipments were altered, and when, the next morning, Rosa Veroni returned with a bundle of ledgers under one arm and exhaustion under both eyes. She set them on Wolfe's desk without a word. He examined the first 2 pages, then passed them to me. Cross-check weights, he said, and dates. Focus on the past 2 months. Anything that varies more than 10% note it. While I played math detective. Wolfe questioned Rosa gently. Your uncle, he said, is not merely complicit. He is central. She stiffened. He's old school. He wants to keep the business afloat, no matter what. And Lustra. He's a thug, a driver with ambition. Tony hated him. You believe your uncle capable of harming your brother? She swallowed. No, but I believe he might have turned away, looked the other way, and that someone else did the rest. I handed Wolfe a slip of paper with 3 shipment dates circled. All left at night. All were overpacked by weight, and all went to addresses that don't exist. Excellent. Wolfe murmured, These are the veins. Now we find the heart. Meaning we bait Lustra. He turned to Rosa. Would you allow yourself to be followed? Her face paled. If it helps. It will, he said. You will visit the plant this evening. Stay only 5 minutes. Speak to no one. Act nervous. Let them see you carrying a small envelope. What will be in it? Paper. Nothing more. But it must appear to matter. Then you will leave and walk no car. No cab walk for blocks to a cafe. Sit at the window. Stay 1 hour. You think they'll follow me? If they believe you possess what Anthony hid. Yes, if Lustra follows, we catch him in the act. If he doesn't, then we have the wrong villain. She agreed, not easily, but firmly. The plan went into motion at 6:17 p.m. Rosa entered the plant with the envelope, glanced nervously around, and left 5 minutes later. I followed at a distance, shadowing her to the cafe, and sure enough Lustra showed. He appeared 15 minutes later, pretending to buy cigarettes at a stand across the street, then slouched into a car and parked facing the window. He didn't order coffee. He didn't move. He just watched. I gave Saul the signal from the corner. Saul nodded and vanished. At 7:29, Rosa left the cafe. Lustra waited 60 seconds, then started his car and pulled slowly into traffic, 2 lengths behind. Her. We followed them both, careful, quiet, smooth. Rosa turned into a narrow residential street lined with stoops and sycamores. She slipped through the alley behind a shuttered laundry. Lustra parked, got out. Then he moved. Too fast, too aggressive. Before he reached the alley mouth, Saul was there calm as a sigh, badge in hand, revolver low. I closed the other end. Evening, I said. Lustra froze. What the hell, Anthony Veroni? I said. Where is he? He twitched like a muscle spasm. Then nothing. Flat silence. Wolfe had been right. The pressure would make someone crack. Only we didn't know yet how far that crack had spread. Lustra didn't talk not that night. Not when Saul cuffed him. Not in the back of the unmarked car. Not even when he got a glimpse of Wolfe's stationery, which usually had the effect of garlic on vampires. He sat with his arms crossed, and his mouth sealed like a jar of contraband pickles. But there was something brittle in his stillness, a man not confident, but cornered. Wolfe, upon hearing the arrest, did not celebrate. He didn't even blink. He simply told Fritz to delay dinner by 20 minutes and called Inspector Kramer. Kramer, naturally, was thrilled to hear from us. Goodwin, he barked over the line. This better not be another one of Wolfe's half-baked finds to get. My men chasing sausage trucks. Actually, I said, this one's fully baked. We've got Lastra attempting to intercept a woman he believed was carrying evidence. We've got audio of him conspiring with Pietro Veroni. And we've got a man missing, possibly dead. There was silence on the line for a beat. Send me what you have. I'll meet you at Wolfe's. Which meant the inspector was taking it seriously. By the time Kramer arrived, Wolfe had cleared his desk of everything but a carafe of beer and the Veroni ledgers. Rosa was in the front room under Fritz's protection, and I had the recording queued up and ready. Saul sat beside me, arms folded, looking like a stone Buddha in a trench coat. Kramer stomped in with the grace of a street cleaner and the charm of a tax audit. He glared at everyone before aiming his full scowl at Wolfe. You better not be wasting my time. I never waste anything, Wolfe replied. Not even breath. Sit. Kramer sat. I hit play. The recording wasn't long, just enough to confirm that Lastra and Pietro were working together and had a pressing concern about a missing item the brother had taken. It was damning in tone, if not fully in content. Kramer's scowl deepened. So they're hiding something. That doesn't mean the kid's dead. No, Wolfe said. But it means he was silenced. And unless we find what he hid, someone else might get hurt. Kramer looked at Saul. Where's Lastra? Being held, quietly, and the girl, safe, I said. And useful. Kramer rubbed his forehead. What are they smuggling? Drugs? I doubt it, Wolfe said. Too obvious. Too clumsy. The packaging is suggestive of something more durable, less chemically sensitive. Perhaps data, perhaps diamonds, perhaps microtech. Smuggled inside the sausage, Wolfe gave him a look. The casing, Inspector, a perfect disguise. Especially in a plant where no one questions a sealed link. Kramer's lips flattened. You have proof? Not yet. But we're close. Then get it. You've got 48 hours before I drag Lastra in and charge him with obstruction and bad breath. Wolfe nodded. We'll need your men. Quietly. No raids. Just shadows. Kramer stood. You've got them? After he left, Wolfe turned to me. We must locate Anthony Veroni. If he is dead, we need the body. If he is alive, he's in hiding or being held. Precisely. Begin at the plant. It was past 10 when I arrived at Veroni and Sons. The place was dark except for the rear loading bay, where a dim light flickered above a stack of empty crates. I scaled the fence not gracefully, but with purpose and slipped through the back. The plant was quiet, too quiet, even for nighttime. I moved past the smoker and the packing line, flashlight in hand, following a hunch Wolfe had planted like a seed hours earlier. He wouldn't hide it far, Wolfe had said, nor would he leave it unguarded. I found the old freezer near the back. It was large, locked, and humming softly. The lock was a simple pad. The bolt cutters I'd brought weren't subtle, but they were effective. Inside, among the hanging meat and sealed bins, I found a crate, not marked, not labeled, just stashed between frozen salami and regret. I cracked it open. Inside were dozens of sausage links, each vacuum sealed in tight plastic, but the weight wasn't right. They were too firm, too uniform. I sliced one open dot. It wasn't meat. It was a plastic shell molded to look like sausage. Inside were several tiny metal discs, thin as coins, microchips, maybe encrypted, maybe priceless. And then, in the back of the freezer, a sound. I swung the light and caught the glint of something metal bars. A cage, and inside it, hunched and shivering, was Tony Veroni. His eyes were wide. His beard had grown in, but he was alive. "Archie," he croaked. "Archie Goodwin, the one and only." I said, "Hold tight, Tony. You're going home." 10 minutes later, with Sol covering our exit and Rosa on the way, I had Tony wrapped in a blanket, sipping warm coffee in the back of Kramer's car. Wolfe, informed via a rapid-fire call, gave only 2 words: "Well done." Back at the brownstone, Tony told his story. "I found the fake sausage 2 weeks ago," he said. "They were using our orders, hollowing out real product, replacing it. I tried to photograph one. That's when Lastra caught me. Uncle Pietro. He didn't stop him. They said they'd let me go if I told them where the proof was." "Did you?" "No. I hid it in the freezer crate. I figured they'd never look inside something marked for disposal. Then they locked me up." "Why keep you alive?" Wolfe asked. Tony looked at his sister. "Insurance. They thought I'd tell them eventually, or that Rosa would." Wolfe nodded. "And now we have both the product and the witness and the motive." I said. "Yes," Wolfe murmured. "Greed, sustained by family loyalty, enforced by fear. A classic recipe." The next morning, Kramer raided the plant. They confiscated 3 crates of sausage and arrested Pietro Veroni at his home. Lastra cracked an hour later. He confessed everything: the smuggling ring, the switch to counterfeit, casings, the buyers abroad, the setup to make Tony disappear quietly. Pietro had known, sanctioned it, even profited from it. Rosa, naturally, took over the business with Wolfe's blessing, if silence counts as such. That evening, as we returned to our usual post-dinner routine, Wolfe poured his beer, adjusted his napkin, and finally spoke. "Sausage," he said, "is not to be trifled with." I raised my glass. "I'll drink to that." And we did. 3 days after the arrests, the brownstone was as still and satisfied as a cat after cream. Wolfe had returned to his orchids, Fritz to his sauces, and I to the thankless art of typing up client statements and filing receipts that no one but the tax man would ever want to see. The Veroni matter had wrapped clean, or as clean as a sausage ring involving smuggling microchips and locking relatives in meat freezers could get. Tony Veroni was recovering physically and psychologically. Kramer had assured Wolfe that the charges against Tony would be dropped, and Rosa had been granted full control of the factory. She'd already announced a temporary closure for restructuring, which was code for fumigating the rats and scrubbing the stench of corruption off the floor tiles. Still, Wolfe wasn't finished when he calls for a final office gathering. It's not because he misses people. It's because there's a piece still unslotted in the puzzle, and he intends to fit it with an audience. The summons went out promptly. Rosa Veroni, Tony Veroni, Inspector Kramer, Saul Panzer, and, yes, Pietro Veroni, who had been released on bail pending trial. Kramer didn't like that part, but Wolfe insisted. Why? Kramer asked me when I delivered the invitation in person. Because Wolfe's hungry, I said. For justice, for a tidy conclusion. At 4 p.m., the office was full. Pietro sat stiffly, his eyes flicking between Wolfe and the door like he might run, but couldn't decide which direction. Offered fewer lawyers. Rosa sat beside Tony, who looked pale but solid. Kramer had claimed the red chair without asking. Saul stood quietly near the bookshelves, arms crossed, unreadable. Wolfe didn't rise. He never does. But when he spoke, the air shifted, like someone had opened a vault of cold truth. Ladies and gentlemen, you are here because I find disorder intolerable. The Veroni matter has been arrested, but not resolved. We know who smuggled. We know what was smuggled. We know who was complicit. But we have not yet addressed motive in full, nor the consequences. Pietro's voice cut in. I've already confessed. You confessed, Wolfe said, to economic desperation and opportunism. That is insufficient. Pietro flushed. What more do you want from me? Understanding. Wolfe said simply, your niece and nephew deserve to know why. Not merely what you did, but why you let a man like Lastra into your family business. Why you risked everything for a paltry return. Pietro's mouth twitched. You wouldn't understand. Try me. The old man folded his arms. The factory was dying. Competition from factory farms. Price pressure from chains. We couldn't keep up. I tried to modernize. The board refused. Then Lastra came. He offered a solution. Small shipments. Big payoff. No violence. He said. Nothing. Ugly. Wolfe's brow creased. But when Anthony discovered the shipments, he threatened to go to the police. Said he'd expose the whole thing. I begged him to keep quiet, just a few more weeks. He refused. Then Lastra took over. By took over, I said, you mean he locked your nephew in a freezer? I didn't order that. Pietro snapped. I never wanted him hurt. But you let it happen, Rosa said, her voice like cold iron. He didn't answer. Wolfe let the silence breathe before speaking again. I must commend Anthony Veroni. Despite intimidation, he protected the evidence. Despite confinement, he endured. And despite betrayal, he did not capitulate. Tony looked down. I just wanted to protect the business. Wolfe nodded. And you did. You preserved its soul. Kramer cleared his throat. So are we done here? Or is there another criminal hiding in a sausage link somewhere? Wolfe looked directly at Rosa. Miss Veroni, there is one matter remaining. She blinked. Yes, the ledger. The one you brought me was missing 2 pages. Her eyes widened. What? Wolfe turned to Tony. You removed them. Why? Tony flushed. I don't lie, Wolfe said quietly. You knew those pages could ruin Rosa. You protected her. There was a long silence. Rosa turned to her brother. Tony. He exhaled. The payments. Some of them were signed off under your name. I knew you didn't realize what they were. Lastra was forging the paperwork, but I couldn't let Kramer or anyone else misread it. So I took them. Kramer swore under his breath. Wolfe looked mildly impressed. A risk, but a loyal one. Tony met his sister's eyes. I didn't want you caught in the mess. She reached over and took his hand. You idiot. He smiled. Wolfe shifted in his chair, signaling the end. This matter is concluded. Inspector, you have your testimony. Mr. Veroni, you will prepare yourself for trial. Miss Veroni, you may rebuild what was nearly destroyed. Mr. Goodwin will escort you out. They left one by one. Saul first, then Kramer, muttering about bureaucracy. Rosa lingered at the door. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. He nodded once. I admire a woman who can season integrity with pragmatism. Tony gave me a sheepish smile on the way out. Pietro said nothing. When the door closed, Wolfe sighed and reached for his beer. I raised an eyebrow. So, sausage ring, smuggling, betrayal, redemption. You've had a busy week. Wolfe took a sip. A contemptible misuse of food and family. Think Rosa can run the place clean. She will. She has clarity now. I leaned back. Not bad, boss. Another one in the books. Wolfe didn't respond immediately. Then, quietly, it is a terrible thing, Mr. Goodwin, when the tools of nourishment are used for deceit. But worse still when trust is what's ground and stuffed. I gave him a sideways glance. That's your version of a sermon. He closed his eyes. No, it is simply fact. And with that, the matter of the sausage link secret was closed, sliced, plated, and served. The week following the resolution of the Veroni case brought an eerie kind of peace to the brownstone. No knocks before lunch. No trembling clients, with secrets simmering behind their eyes. No deliveries containing anything more sinister than Fritz's dry-aged beef from Astoria. But I knew better than to expect it to last. Wolfe may prefer the sanctity of routine, but the world has a way of tapping at his windows with greasy fingers. This time, though, the outside world stayed quiet. That meant Wolfe could finally allow himself the luxury of absorbing the case in retrospect, like he does with fine wine, one measured sip at a time, letting the details settle on the tongue before swallowing the moral dregs. It also meant I got stuck with the part of the job no one writes about: paperwork. On Thursday morning, Wolfe called me into the office with that particular tone, half inquiry, half test of loyalty. He was seated, of course, with a red-bound notebook open in front of him, a fountain pen poised like a general's baton. Mr. Goodwin, the matter of Veroni and Sons still leaves a distaste. Agreed, I said. Mostly because I haven't had a decent fennel sausage since we found a motherboard inside one. He ignored that. No, not culinary. Ethical. Oh. He tapped a page with one thick finger. Anthony Veroni acted with courage. But it is troubling that he felt compelled to destroy evidence. Even if his intention was protective, he was trying to keep Rose's name clear. Yes, admirable, but misguided. Had the pages fallen into other hands had they been used to obfuscate? Rather than shield, we might have failed to expose the scheme at all. You're not wrong, I said, but you can't fault a guy for trying to save his sister. I do not fault him. I observe the weakness in the chain. That was Wolfe, a man who distrusted improvisation unless he'd personally designed it. There was a pause, filled only by the soft clink of the radiator and the muffled hum of Fritz moving about in the kitchen. Then Wolfe spoke again. I wish to send Rose of Veroni a letter. I raised an eyebrow. That's rare. She deserves acknowledgement. Her decision to expose the matter despite family loyalty was commendable. You're not going to sign it with your name and a rare spice recommendation, are you? No. You will write it, of course. He dictated slowly, with precision, to Miss Rose of Veroni. It is my habit to remain disengaged from affairs beyond the conclusion of their business. However, your conduct merits exception. You demonstrated fortitude, restraint, and moral clarity in the face of deceit not only within your industry, but within your family. That you emerged from the matter with integrity intact is commendable. I extend my respect. Cordially, Nero Wolfe. I typed it, sealed it, and had it sent by hand before lunch. That afternoon, a package arrived. It was small, wrapped in brown butcher paper, tied with twine. No card, no return address. I brought it to Wolfe, who frowned at it like it had personally insulted his orchids. Open it, he said. Inside was a tin old-fashioned, with decorative scrollwork and faint lettering. Veroni Reserve, limited batch, not for sale. Fritz came in to investigate. What is it? Wolfe asked. Fritz lifted the lid, sniffed, and gave a rare smile. Salsiccia di Finocchio. House made, a specialty. Wolfe sniffed as well. Fresh, high-quality pork. The fennel is restrained. I peered in. You think it's safe? Wolfe looked at me as though I'd suggested we deep fry an orchid. Of course it's safe. She would not risk my wrath. Fritz took the tin and disappeared toward the kitchen, no doubt already planning a pasta pairing. Wolfe closed his eyes. There, he said, balance restored. But it wasn't, quite. Not until the next morning, when Rosa herself arrived. Unannounced but not unwelcome. She wore a dark coat and looked more rested than the last time we saw her, still bearing the faint strain of a survivor, but walking, taller with purpose in her step. I came to thank you in person, she said. Wolfe gestured to the red chair. That is acceptable. She sat. The factory is closed for the month. We're cleaning, resetting. Tony's agreed to stay on under supervision. Of course. I let go of the board. Everyone. They were either complicit or useless. You intend to run it alone? No. But I intend to run it right. Wolfe nodded. Then I have no quarrel. She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew an envelope. There's one more thing. A list. Lastra's clients. He kept records, insurance, I suppose. I thought you might want it. Wolfe accepted the envelope, opened it, glanced once, and set it aside. It will be forwarded to Inspector Kramer. She stood. Thank you again for the letter and for treating me like a person, not just a client. I value competence and principle, Wolfe said. You displayed both. She left, her footsteps light, confident. I watched her go. You think she'll make it? She will, Wolfe said. The business may yet fail. Circumstances are volatile, but she will not fail. I turned back to the envelope. Those clients, you think they'll be surprised? They always are. And with that, Wolfe signaled for Fritz and requested his lunch. The tin of sausage was nowhere to be seen by dinner, which I took as a sign of Fritz's approval. Wolfe didn't mention it again, nor the letter, nor Rosa Veroni. But when I saw him later that night, walking among his orchids with a faint smile, I understood. In a world full of secrets stuffed into casings, false loyalties, and cold betrayal, something honest had come out of it. Something worthy of Wolfe's silence. By the time we reached the 9th day after the Veroni matter had been bundled, salted, and hung to dry, things that the brownstone had settled into what Wolfe calls civilized inertia. That means he was back to his orchids for 4 hours a day. His meals were arriving with clockwork precision, and my work life was reduced to fending off potential clients who believed their neighbor. A barking dog was a coded message from Martians. In other words, peace. But peace, like mayonnaise left out on a hot day, never lasts. It began innocently enough. A phone call at 10:14 a.m., a violation of Wolfe's no-call window, which ended promptly at 11. I reached for it before Fritz could lift the receiver, more out of habit than hope. Nero Wolfe's residence, I said. You've reached Archie Goodwin. We're currently not interested in joining a club, changing religions, or contributing to obscure causes involving goats. Who's calling? There was a pause. Then a voicemail. Young, shaken. This is Paulo Veroni, Tony and Rose's cousin. The name rang a faint bell. He'd been mentioned once or twice in passing. Some kind of semi-estranged relative who'd steered clear of the family business, which, given how things had turned out, made him either wise or lucky. I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe, he said. Please. It's urgent. About the factory. I glanced toward the office. Wolfe was in there, of course, likely attempting to re-educate a recalcitrant dendrobium. But he'd left the door open, a sign he wasn't entirely opposed to interruptions. Hold the line, I said, then stuck my head in. A Veroni, young cousin, sounds rattled, claims it's urgent. Wolfe didn't look up. Put him through. I returned, flipped the switch to the intercom, and let Paulo's voice fill the room. He sounded more than rattled. He sounded scared. There's someone watching me, he began, outside my building, for the past 2 nights. And today someone broke into my car. Didn't steal anything, just rifled through. I think they were looking for something. Why? Wolfe asked. What do you possess that might interest anyone connected to Veroni and Sons? A pause. Then, Tony gave me something. Right. Before he disappeared, he said, keep it safe. Don't open it unless I don't come back. I didn't open it, not even after he went missing. But now, "What is it?" Wolfe asked. "A box. Metal. Small. I haven't opened it, I swear. But I think someone knows I have it." Wolfe's voice didn't change. "Where is it now?" "At my place. In a drawer. Locked." "Bring it here," Wolfe said. "Now." "Yes, immediately. Do not attempt to be clever. Do not take detours. And if anyone follows you, do not lead them here. Go to the nearest police precinct and wait." Poirot promised to come straight over. Wolfe hung up and turned to me. "You will meet him at the corner, to blocks west. If you see a tail, divert. We cannot afford a confrontation on our stoop." I got my coat and went. The rain had started again, a thin drizzle that stuck to your collar and made the city smell like wet concrete and cheap coffee. I waited under the awning of a bodega on 34th, watching. A small silver hatchback pulled up at the curb, and a weary young man with olive skin and a messenger bag across his chest stepped out. He had Tony's eyes, only jitterier. "Poirot?" I asked. He nodded. "Are you Archie?" "Depends. You being followed?" I don't think so. Let's take a walk." We looped 3 times, ducked into a deli, circled a fire hydrant, and finally doubled back. No sign of a tail. Satisfied, I led him into the brownstone through the side entrance and up into the office. Wolfe didn't stand naturally. He merely gestured to the red chair. "Mr. Veroni," he said. "The box." Poirot opened his bag, withdrew a small, square metal container brushed aluminum, about the size of a cigar case, and placed it on Wolfe's desk like it was live ordnance. "I didn't look inside," he said again. "You are wiser than your uncle," Wolfe replied. He unlatched the case. Inside, nestled in black velvet, were 4 items: a miniature flash drive, a ledger page with handwritten notes, a folded photograph showing the inside of a shipping container with dozens of imitation sausage links, and a receipt signed and dated linking one of the fake shipments to a buyer in Singapore. Wolfe examined each piece in silence. Then he handed them to me one by one. "These," he said, "are not merely evidence of the smuggling. They are a fail-safe. Anthony intended them as insurance against his own murder." Poirot shifted. "I didn't know what I was holding." "I swear, you did well not to find out." Wolfe instructed me to take copies of everything. Originals would be sent to Kramer. Poirot would remain under Saul's surveillance for the next 24 hours, just to be safe. "You think whoever broke into my car was looking for this?" "No," Wolfe said. "I think they were looking to see if you had already used it." At 4 p.m., Fritz brought in sandwiches porchetta on toasted rye, with a bitter herb slaw that even Wolfe deigned to compliment. We ate quietly, letting the implications settle. Once Poirot had left under Saul's watchful eye, I leaned back in my chair and asked the question. "So who was the intended target of that little package, Lastra?" Wolfe said. "But more likely, the buyers behind him." Anthony understood there was someone higher up, someone who could silence Lastra with a phone call. The box was leverage. "Think it'll be enough to break the bigger operation?" "No," Wolfe said. "But it will force them to retreat." I tapped the photo. "So we've not just shut down Veroni's end. We've torched a piece of the global sausage supply chain. May it stay burned. Wolfe murmured. That night, the office was quiet again. Fritz served chestnut soup and a perfectly crusted tart of leeks and Gruyere. Wolfe was contemplative, eyes half shut over his beer. Strange, I said. How something so small a box, a sausage casing, can carry so much weight. It is not the vessel, Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe said. It is the intent, always the intent. And with that, he retired to the orchards where things bloomed for reasons he could trust. By the time the 10th day closed in, with a whisper of cold wind through the sycamores on 35th Street, I figured we'd seen the last of the Veroni saga. Between the freezer rescue, the sausage sting, the box of insurance, and a couple of sealed indictments, Wolfe had already played his part. But just as a proper sofa falls at the final gasp, this case had one more rise left in it. It came not as a client or a criminal, but a call from Lon Cohen at the Gazette. Archie, he said, voice low and urgent, thought you'd want to know we're holding a piece about the Veroni plant. There's a leak from the DA's office. Something about international buyers, coded shipments. A sausage racket with roots in Singapore and Prague. Sounds like your kind of picnic. I leaned back in my chair. Let me guess, the part they're leaving out is how Wolfe cracked it wide open with a flower pot and a ledger. Lon chuckled. They never include the orchids. But listen, my source says there's one name still under wraps. A buyer, stateside, high profile. Someone with enough muscle to suppress part of the story. Any guess who? They won't say. But it's someone who'd be a problem if exposed. Political connections. Business ties, maybe both. That caught my attention. And, by extension, Wolfe's, because he heard the change in my voice when I stepped back into the office. There's a loose thread, I said. He looked up from his chair, where he'd been rereading an obscure essay on food adulteration in 19th century Vienna, where Lon says the buyers overseas weren't acting alone. One domestic contact, still unnamed. Someone high up, possibly protected. Wolfe exhaled slowly. That is predictable. Yeah, you saw it coming, I suspected. No smuggling. Operation survives without inside aid, preferably well-placed. The question is whether our friend in Singapore had a friend in City Hall or the boardroom. I paced to the windows. So what now? We dig. No. He shifted in his chair. We bait. Bait who? We don't even know the name. We don't need it, Wolfe said. We have the impression of it. A leak. A thread. A weakness. All we must do is present a threat great enough to tempt a counter-strike. I knew that tone. It meant Wolfe was about to deploy the nuclear option immovable exposure. He dictated a brief letter, addressed to the editor of the Gazette, CC'd discreetly to 3 legal offices and 1 international trade liaison. It made no accusation, named no names. It simply stated that new evidence had emerged suggesting collusion between domestic logistics firms and foreign tech smugglers operating under food industry cover. The tone was academic, cold, suggestive. I typed it, sent it, and waited. 3 hours later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man in a pinstriped coat, a silk scarf, and a cologne that belonged in a courtroom. "Mr. Wolfe?" he asked. "Depends," I said. "Who's asking?" He handed me a card. Arnold D. Hines, Counsel to McCadden Consolidated Imports. Never heard of them. But Wolfe had. When I showed him the card, his brows rose barely. "Show him in," he said. Dotmer. Hines entered with the gait of a man who wore lawsuits like cufflinks. He sat without being invited, crossed his legs, and opened with a smile as sharp as a cleaver. "We understand you've been involved in an investigation related to Veroni and Sons." "I've been involved," Wolfe said, "in a resolution." "Excellent," Hines said. "Then perhaps we can ensure that resolution remains mutually beneficial." "Meaning?" "Discretion," said Hines. "There's no value in further public inquiry, not when the guilty parties have been apprehended. I'm authorized to offer a substantial donation to Mr. Wolfe's preferred cause, provided the matter is considered fully and formally concluded." Wolfe didn't blink. "You presume I have a cause. We're aware you've supported the Orchid Conservancy." Wolfe's lips curled slightly. "They are hardly involved in contraband." "Of course not," Hines said quickly. "But we all value delicate things." I was ready to escort him to the curb by the collar. But Wolfe raised one finger. "You represent McCadden?" "Yes." "Which holds indirect control of 5 cargo terminals in New Jersey." "Correct." "And provides export coordination for 7 food distributors in the tri-state area." "Yes." "Then you should know," Wolfe said, "that Inspector Kramer already has the list of foreign buyers and a duplicate of the Singapore receipt. If he has not already traced them to your client's accounts, he soon will." Hines's smile faded. "Then I take it you're not interested in an arrangement." "I am not," Wolfe said. "But I'm pleased to know you believe such arrangements are necessary." Hines stood. "This will be remembered." "I hope so," Wolfe said. "Lapses in memory are tiresome." I walked Hines out with less grace than I offered most salesmen. Back in the office, I shut the door behind me. "You knew McCadden was involved." "I deduced," Wolfe said. "Their import schedules align precisely with the Veroni anomalies." Their silence was telling. "And now, Mr. Hines will attempt damage control. But it is too late. Saul has already delivered the files to Kramer. And once the Gazette prints its story carefully edited, of course the real work begins." I sat down. "You always say justice is a dish best served by intellect." Wolfe poured his beer. "Justice," he said, "is frequently undercooked. But if one must consume it, let it be in proper portions." As evening fell, and the clatter of distant sirens dissolved into the buzz of the radiator, I realized something. Wolfe hadn't taken this case for money, or even for food. He'd taken it for order for the restoration of balance in a world where even sausages could lie. And when he raised his glass that night, it wasn't a toast. It was punctuation. It was 3 days after the attempted payoff when Inspector Kramer showed up at the brownstone, trench coat flapping, jaw tight enough to punch a clock with. Fritz had barely opened the door before Kramer pushed past him, heading straight for Wolfe's office with the look of a man who'd swallowed a wasp and wanted to know who put it there. Wolfe naturally, was seated. He didn't rise. He didn't greet. He merely gestured toward the red chair with one fat finger. Kramer took it with less grace than usual. "I should have known," he growled. "You sit here, drink beer, smell your damn flowers." And meanwhile half the smuggling operation's tentacles were wriggling into the East River docks. "You should have known," Wolfe agreed placidly. "But you did not." I coughed into my hand, which earned me a glare from Kramer and a raised eyebrow from Wolfe. "I've got McCann's shipping records, Goodwin's photographs, and that flash drive you sent over. 3 international warrants are being prepared. You realize what you've stirred up?" "I do," Wolfe said, a stew. Kramer leaned forward. "They wanted you to stay quiet, offered money. What made you push instead of bury it?" Wolfe's voice cooled a degree. "Because they presumed I could be bought. Because they insulted the work we do here. And because they endangered something I value." "What's that?" Wolfe gestured toward the ledger still sitting open on his desk. "Integrity, even in sausage." Kramer sat back. For once, he didn't argue. "They'll make noise," he warned. "There'll be calls. People who don't want names in print. The DA's already getting heat from 2 senators and a trade consortium." "Good," Wolfe said. "You like that?" "I do not care for noise, Inspector, but I do care for its usefulness. Let them make it. It means they are afraid, and fear, properly directed, is a clarifying force." Kramer shook his head and stood. "Someday, Wolfe, you're going to push the wrong man." "Doubtful," Wolfe said. "Most wrong men do not read." After the door slammed, Wolfe reached for his beer, sipped, and let out the faintest sigh. That was his version of a trumpet blast. I leaned back in my chair. "So, we unstuffed the sausage. We disemboweled it," Wolfe corrected, "and exposed the offal beneath. Not a bad week," I said. "We shut down a smuggling ring, rescued a sausage maker, saved a business, and embarrassed a corporate fixer." Wolfe inclined his head. "A savory outcome." He lapsed into silence, eyes half closed, fingers laced across his belly. I stood, stretched. "What now?" "Now," he said, "we observe the aftermath. The press will speak, the courts will stir, and Rosa Veroni will either thrive or fall. But she will do so without lies beneath her feet. And us." He opened his eyes. "Dinner." Fritz, as if summoned by unspoken ritual, appeared in the doorway with a silver tray and the faintest smile. On the tray, arranged with geometric precision, was a bowl of lentil soup with herb cream, a baked duck breast with blood orange reduction, and, yes, one perfectly grilled fennel sausage courtesy of Rose's new, untainted kitchen. I held up my glass to the truth. Wolfe clinked his beer glass without rising. "To justice," he said, and as I sat beside him, plate in hand, I remembered something Saul once told me. When Wolfe wins, it's never with noise or flash. It's with silence that resounds. That night, silence was served hot with a side of truth.